Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for the Wednesday episode of the North Shore Drive by Christopher Carter, our Post-Gazette Steelers insider. We're going to be talking about TJ Watt. He is the subject of a lot of scorn locally. The fans are not happy with him. Nationally, a lot of the grading services are not happy with him. We're going to get Chris's take on what's going on with TJ Watt. We're also going to talk about the tight end situation. Pat Freiermuth not playing much. Jonnu Smith playing a lot and not playing particularly well. And that's just not just our assessment. That is his quarterback's assessment. We're going to dig through all of that. Before we do, we want to remind you that this show is brought to you by FanDuel. We also want to thank Edgar, Snyder, and Associates. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment is over? Who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. Insurance company doctors do. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, call Edgar, Snyder, and Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the work comp rights you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Chris, TJ Watt graded poorly this week on Pro Football Focus. It's been about a month slump for him in their eyes. I think they're being kinder to him than a lot of the fans are about how he's performed in the last handful of weeks. Especially considering the contract extension he won in the offseason. In my PFF grades recap, I noted that it's not just that he's not getting the pressure per se. I think the pressure's down a little bit, but he's still generating some. The problem in PFF size seems to be he's not putting himself in position to make other plays. And when he is, he's whiffing a lot. He has 6 tackles and 6 missed tackles in the last 4 games. How are you taking everything in? I know you just finished writing your grades post that goes on postgazette.com. I haven't gotten to see it, so I'm curious what your assessment is of TJ Watt this past week against the Bills, but also, maybe a bit more globally than that.
I said in this, and this is the lead for my grades article, I think this was the worst game we have ever seen TJ Watt play. And that's often a big statement, and I would literally need to then go back through every game he's ever played and see what games that he was really bad. But I could just not remember a time past his rookie season, because I'm kind of, ignoring that too. But since he's been super TJ Watt, defensive player of the year TJ Watt, I don't think I've seen a game where a team has left him in one-on-one situations this much, and he's been this, he's impacted the game at this low a level. And that's where I think the biggest problems in this game came. It wasn't just in the passing game. It wasn't just on the play where he was left unblocked and he whiffed on sacking Josh Allen, but also in the run game. They were running right at his gap in this game, and he wasn't doing anything about it. And that is unlike TJ Watt. It's also unlike TJ Watt for most of this season, because I do think there have been weeks where fans have been mad at him when he's been triple teamed, and that's not on that. Those aren't on TJ Watt. And there's times where the triple teams have opened up opportunities for others to make plays, whether they've made them or not. And there's also games where I think that he's gotten bad grades when he's made really good plays. Like, 2 weeks ago against the Bears, he had a sack strip fumble that led to a touchdown. I'm sorry, that's not a bad game. But this is different. This is a game where you can look at it and say, okay, something's wrong here. And I think that the hope is that he can get back on it and he can just kind of see what teams are doing. I think one thing that the Bills were doing well was that they were kind of sealing him a little bit more and just kind of attacking a certain alignments that he was in. But I think that the thing is that historically that hasn't stopped TJ Watt in the past. Matt Williamson pointed out on Twitter this week that his get off is slower than it ever has been. And that doesn't always determine everything. But part of what I think what's made TJ Watt such an elite player for most of his career, and he's already a Hall of Fame player, is that he is such a well put together player. There's not one part of his game that dominates one thing over the other. It's not just power, it's not just speed, it's that he combined both at an elite level, and to the point that made him the best defensive player in football for about 3 or 4 years. But now I think you're starting to see that explosiveness isn't there as much, and he still makes tons of plays. He's still most of the season, he has been a very good player. But this past week, I think, was the first sign of oh man, this is pretty rough. That was real and not him getting double teamed and triple teamed into oblivion to be taken out of the game.
Yeah, I don't think it's a slump either, Chris. I think it is. The age is starting to show itself a little bit, and I feel like people get a phobia of you saying that, of like, well, he's getting a little bit old, and they hear you saying T.J. Watt sucks, and I don't think that that's the argument. I think maybe on some of the national hot take shows, but at least in my eyes, I think you can still be a very good player in the NFL. But when the defense is built around you being an absolute dominant force and you're not, that's where it's noticeable. If you put him on the Rams, or if you put him on the Chiefs, or some of these other, maybe I'm using the Chiefs as a bad example considering they're 6-6, but some of these Super Bowl caliber teams, you put him there, I think he shines. I think he looks great. But he no longer has the ability to transcend everything that is around him. And that's what aging looks like for a player like that, is it not?
I think it is. It happens. And players make adjustments to this too. I mean, heck, his predecessor was James Harrison. James Harrison needed to adjust his game at one point. There was at one point where he was the most physically dominant player at the outside linebacker position in the NFL. And then eventually he wasn't anymore. If you go back to like 2012 or 2013, there was a game against the Texans where I think it was their offensive tackle, Dwayne Brown, really roughed him up. And like, I think that was the first sign to him that he's not Superman. He can't just win everything being the strongest guy all the time. But as he got older, he adapted. He figured out different ways to win. He went to the Bengals for a short bit, realized, okay, I'm not just this. I can't just do anything I want in the NFL. I have to fit a specific role. Came back to the Steelers and found more success with them. So I know that he likes to get loud on social media these days, but he truly saw a rise in his play both times he came back to play for the Steelers under Mike Tomlin. And when I look at that, it's like those adjustments, those are the things that players go through in their old age. Ask Mean Joe Green, the greatest Steeler of all time, talked about how he had to adapt how he played because he had a pinched nerve in his neck, and it changed how he had to play as he got older. And he wasn't the same super dominant force that he was in 72, 73, 74, basically through 75. Like, I think for 6 years, Joe Green might have been the most unstoppable force of defensive tackle in the history of the NFL. But when you get to the late 70s and 78 and 70, he was still a productive player because he adapted his game. And I think that's what TJ Watt has to do. He has to learn how to adapt his game around his current skills, and that will determine how he plays in the latter part of his career. Again, still a Hall of Famer, still a great player. And I don't think that, like you said, I don't think he's in a slump. I think this was a really bad game, and he has to bounce back from it, and he has to figure out what teams are doing to minimize him.
There are a lot of people who will still argue on his behalf that the Steelers just need to deploy him better. They need to, quote unquote, move him around is the words that get said. And I think people think pass for smart football analysis. I don't know what that means. It doesn't mean anything objectively speaking. If you don't talk about it any further, X's and O's, then it's just pablum to me. Am I wrong, Chris? It's the same as when people will say, "Oh, you got to scheme the guy open when he's struggling on offense, a receiver. Oh, they got to scheme him open like it's super easy." It seems like the most reductive analysis possible to me. But is there something the coaching staff could be doing for him that is not just stupid?
No, listen, I'm right with you, man. That like, there's sometimes that people just say things just because they heard someone else say it, or they want to have a coaching critique and they don't know what it is. TJ Watt is best when he's on the side that he's on. When they've moved him around, it's not that they move him around that frees him up. It's what it does to set up the times when he is back on his normal side. And what I mean by that is when they do flip him because he typically lines up over the right tackle, if they move him to the left tackle, it's not that he dominates when he's moved to the left tackle position, because he doesn't. It's that when he gets moved back to the right tackle position and the offensive line is busy calculating where he's at and he gets that occasional one-on-one, he's won those. And so that's not the problem with TJ Watt right now. I think the problem with TJ Watt is he's getting older. He has to figure out how to win while he's older. He's not the physical specimen that he was just even a couple years ago. And that happens to everybody. But I think one thing that TJ Watt has been very good at for his entire career, he's also been very technically sound. Myles Garrett, I think, has improved in his technique over the years. But for most of his career, he was kind of just a guy that just overpowered you or was just more explosive. And he was just that much better of an athlete at the edge rusher position than you. He was a better athlete than TJ Watt his whole career, but TJ Watt had technique on him. And I think that was something that he had. And now I think that the difference in their athleticism is being seen every single week. While Myles Garrett is also sharpened as a technique guy, I think that's what you're seeing the difference is that Myles Garrett is in his athletic prime. He's still one of the best athletes in all of football. TJ Watt's still really good, but I think he now has to make up for more in what he doesn't have on the athletic side of the things. Again, he does have a lot still, but it's just that I think there's certain elements of his game that just aren't as easily accessible anymore.
Chris, what do you make of the general age of this team? Paul Zeitz led his show last night talking about that exact issue. That it's not just TJ Watt, it's Cam Heyward, it's Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Rodgers on the offensive side of the ball. You've got these older guys, but they are surrounded by some degree of youth. Are the Steelers as a team breaking down here in the late part of the schedule, or is it just individually these guys aren't quite as good and the younger players haven't quite picked up the slack the way the Steelers needed them to?
I mean, it's tough to tell because we're still in the midway to see what is the breakdown here. I think that it's been a mix of things each week. It's been one thing after another. I think the problem is that there's been no calling card that this team has been able to hang its hat on and say this is definitively going to be good every single time we go out. Like in the years where they were like in 2021 and 2022 and 2023 and 2024, even last year to a degree, those 4 years, one thing you could always say was this team was going to bring the heat. TJ Watt was going to be a disruptor. And like you saw in the one stretch of 2022 when he wasn't around, the team was a disaster. And then when he came back, even though he wasn't even at full strength, it made them competitive. They were able to, I think they finished the year 7-2 at the, in their last 9 games. But that's been a calling card. And I think that was supposed to be a calling card for this team, but it just hasn't been because TJ Watt hasn't been dominant. He's been a very good player, but he hasn't been dominant. I think Nick Herbig started to emerge. Alex Highsmith, when he's been healthy, has been really good. But I think that's the thing is that there's just not a calling card that this team can hang its hat on right now. They still are developing the run game. The offensive line, I think, is trending upwards as a whole, but still has its problems. The pass game really hasn't taken off. The pass defense is very up and down at times. When they run their 2 high safety looks, I think they're actually one of the better coverage units in the NFL. When they don't run their 2 cover high safety looks, I think they're one of the worst cover units in the NFL. So it's kind of funny just how up and down this team has been. But as Mike Tomlin said, that's why they're 6-6. And I think that's kind of a good picture for why they are where they are, is that no one thing has consistently been good for the Steelers. Most things have been either good or bad at some point or another.
Chris, we're going to get into the tight end usage on the other side of this break, switch to the offensive side of the ball. Before we do, we want to thank another couple of sponsors. Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci are Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos attorneys. They've been standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancers with over 85 years of experience. Visit them online at sdklaw.com. We also want to thank Olivia Numismatic Rarities. Gold prices are through the roof, and there's never been a better time to cash in. At Olivia Numismatic Rarities in Shadyside, you can turn your unwanted gold into instant cash safely, securely, and with full transparency. Bring your old jewelry, coins, or bullion in and get top dollar from Pittsburgh's most trusted gold buyer. Visit onrcoins.com or stop by 5833 Ellsworth Avenue today. We are back, second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner, joined by Christopher Carter, our Steelers insider at the Post-Gazette. We're talking Steelers tight ends. Chris, many people, including yourself, have called attention to how little Pat Freiermuth is getting in terms of usage at tight end. He's giving away a lot of snaps to Jonnu Smith, and it's kind of hard to reconcile why. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers was upset with him the other day for the route toward the end of the game. Called him out a little bit in that post game. He's not been particularly great as a blocker if you believe Pro Football Focus's scores there. I think there was one of the fourth down plays. He got blown up pretty badly. So sometimes with tight ends, fans want them to get catch. They want them to look like Travis Kelce, and guys are in there because of the less celebrated elements. I don't know that we're seeing that with Jonnu Smith, and yet he's still getting a lot more playing time than a guy who's been a proven pass catcher in this offense with significantly worse quarterback play than the Steelers have had this season with Aaron Rodgers at times. What's your assessment of what is going on there? Is Arthur Smith just playing favorites from his history with Jonnu Smith in Tennessee?
I don't know if you're playing favorites, but it's a logical theory. I'm not sure. It's a theory that makes sense when we don't have much to base it off of, because I don't understand why Jonnu Smith gets snaps over Pat Freiermuth. And so like me saying, oh, he's doing this because he has favor with him from his time in Tennessee and Atlanta, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's a theory, but I have nothing to base it on other than just that seems to add up, right? Like, there's no thing that I've been told from Smith, from either of the Smiths. I guess that's the thing. It's because they're both Smith. Maybe it's because he just likes another guy with his last name. I don't know. But it certainly doesn't have a clear answer. And the problem is, and I think from a coaching standpoint, it doesn't make sense. Like, there's just no reason to do this. It would make sense if Jonnu Smith was a better run blocker than Pat Freiermuth. But not only there was at one point where I thought maybe they were on the same level. They're not even. Pat Freiermuth has become a decent run blocker now. Like, he contributes. That used to be his biggest weakness when he started with the Steelers. He would get destroyed in the run game, even a couple years ago. But especially, I think this year, he has become a better run blocker. And it's like they don't care. They're just throwing Jonnu Smith out there. Not just that play, but there was a run play where they were running a pitch to Jaylen Warren. And granted, this was a little circumstantial because there was a corner blitz from Christian Benford, and I thought that's sometimes tough to see. Jonnu Smith's assignment was to get out in space and block a linebacker, but he's the only person that can make this block. And it's like, you got to have your head on the swivel. You have to be aware that corner blitz, with where his alignment is, DK Metcalf can't get him. You got to at least bump him, do something. And he lets the guy run into the backfield, and before Jaylen Warren can pick up any momentum, he's stopped right away. And so you have that. You have him just losing at the point of attack. You have him not getting open. There's times where I think the question is, okay, what is it here that you do, Jonnu Smith? And that's disappointing, because early on in the season, there were things that he was doing. He was getting open. He was making plays with the ball in his hands. Maybe it's just the bad luck that's been going around with the ball spreading around, but between his blocking and his lack of playmaking, I think he has become a major liability for this offense. And at no point should Pat Freiermuth be on the bench for Jonnu Smith unless Pat Freiermuth is in the middle of a 10-catch, 150-yard game, and he says, "Coach, I need a breather."
Yeah, I was doing some of the statistics, Chris, in my PFF grades post, and like yards per route run, he's near the absolute bottom of guys who've played as much as he has. I think I went with 20 targets as the baseline, and I think he ranked 47th out of 48 or something like that in terms of yards per route run. So there's just not a ton of efficiency there. And if you're blowing up people in the running game, then you can live with that. There are tight ends who make a living in this league that way, but he's not that right now either. So it has become somewhat inexplicable. Chris, I wanted to ask you, because you asked the question that Aaron Rodgers gave a grouchy answer when you tried to tie it to the coaching. I guess I would expect him from that in that situation. But then he turned right around and he did bring up the Jonnu Smith thing and the film study and the calling out the habits. Was that a more subtle way of him trying to get his message across to Arthur Smith, is publicly airing that laundry? Or was it more of how he suggested, was he wants a guy like Jonnu Smith to take more accountability, show up, do the little things right? Who was the message for there? Or was it maybe for both of them?
I think it was more so for the players, particularly because Aaron Rodgers is not one to hold his tongue about coaches. We've seen this man openly disrespect his coaches for years. So, like, he disrespected Mike McCarthy, he disrespected Robert Saleh. Now, maybe you can say, okay, maybe he wouldn't Mike Tomlin, but a lot of people in this town think that Mike Tomlin's a terrible coach, so why wouldn't he disrespect him? I gave him that avenue to do it. He looked at me like I was crazy. I was like, I'm just asking the question because you're saying these things aren't looking good in practice. So if Aaron Rodgers was going to air some stuff out, I think he would. I do think that he was political in how he chose Jonnu Smith. Because one, Jonnu Smith isn't playing well. But two, I think Jonnu Smith is the professional enough to be able to take that on the chin and keep pushing. Whereas I think if he says that about Roman Wilson, granted, I think Roman Wilson's getting open right now. I don't think he's really a problem. But if he says that about a young player, that might get them down a little bit more. And they need these young players to believe in themselves. And I think that he's being political and strategic with who he points out. Because I do think Aaron Rodgers is a smart man. But I also think that when you look at it and you say, like, if I tell the truth, that maybe Jonnu Smith hasn't been showing up to film studies as much. We found out, and I guess I'm putting this out here before we write about it because we're still looking at it. We found out when we talked to Roman Wilson that Aaron Rodgers hosts weekly film sessions in his own house for the Steelers players to come to. Roman Wilson told us that. Now we're still working on developing that stuff there. So we want to talk to more players when we get in the locker room on Wednesday about it. So thankfully this episode airs on Wednesday. But Adam, I think that's his way of subtly calling out, like, we have the opportunities to be sharper. And he's even saying he has to be sharper. He noted there was a deep ball to Roman Wilson that he badly missed on. And he said it was a crappy throw for, censoring myself there. But there were also plays where guys break open, and they break open in ways that aren't part of the structure of the play. And so because it's not part of the structure, he can't anticipate it. And he's not in the age where when something happens that he doesn't anticipate, that he can easily react to it and capitalize on it the way that he could when he was, 35-year-old Aaron Rodgers. So I think that's a big part of what's going on here, is that I do think he's calling out the players. I do think that there's sometimes that, maybe him and Arthur Smith might butt heads, but from everything I've seen, I think Arthur Smith defers to Aaron Rodgers a lot. So I think that there's a sense that Aaron Rodgers knows that if he talks about Arthur Smith like that, then he's kind of talking about himself. So it's more so about guys getting in the details and getting them in with Aaron Rodgers alongside them, so that they can all be on the same accord. Because when they have connected, this offense does have explosive potential. They're one of the least explosives of the offense in the NFL. But I think when they've been able to put it together, you see the speed of Austin, you see the speed of Wilson, you see the speed of Metcalf, you see how dangerous these running backs can be out of the backfield. You see how big of a threat Darnell Washington is. There's potential in this offense. You got to unlock it. And as I pointed out in my film study last week, it's not that they're not running routes in the middle part of the field, because they are, and they're doing it to their top guys. And sometimes they're not getting them the ball. But I think sometimes maybe it's not being there because they're not finding, they're not combing through the details as neatly as they need to, as Aaron Rodgers put it, from Monday to Saturday. And that's what the Steelers, I think that is him calling out Steelers players for that part of the lack of execution.
Steelers are 5.5-point underdogs this week, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. So check them out if you want to place a wager on the game. Chris, how would you rank the Steelers pass catchers today, right now? Not early in the season, not where we think they could be, but as we sit here with 5 games to go, regardless of position, I think DK Metcalf is probably still number 1, but it's not clear to me who should be number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in that pecking order.
I'll say this. Now, when you say pass catchers, are we saying pure hands, or are we talking about combining hands with yak ability or getting open and stuff?
Just the total package of who should be touching the ball the most. And I guess you can throw Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell in there, because obviously Kenny Gainwell has done a lot of good work recently.
Metcalf's 1, Freiermuth's 2. This is where it gets tricky, because honestly, I think Kenneth Gainwell's 3. He makes some ridiculous catches. I mean, the one-handed snag that he had in this game that turned into a 17-yard game, and it's the third time he's done that this season, where the pass is so low sometimes that I think that it's being thrown away, and he'll scoop it with one hand and just quickly accelerate into space. So I give him credit. I'm going to say Roman Wilson at 4, and that's without a lot of evidence of him actually making plays. But Adam, the more and more I look at his tape, I'm like, this guy's getting open. They got to throw this guy the ball. And when they throw him the ball, they got to throw it accurately, because there's been times where he gets targets and I'm just and they just miss. If Roman Wilson could get you one explosive reception a game, it changes this offense, because then it forces defense to have to honor that, and then it opens up other people. And that's just something this offense has not unlocked. And I don't think it's Roman Wilson's fault. So I guess he's at 4. I'd put Washington at 5 because I think he's really found himself. No, I put Warren at 5 because when he does catch he's not as dynamic of a receiving threat because of he doesn't have the wide catch radius that Gainwell does when he's reaching everywhere. But
he doesn't smash people the way Darnell Washington does.
Exactly. Like Darnell Washington will go up and get the ball. And then when he gets the ball, it's like, oh man, why do I have to tackle that guy? And Jaylen Warren is why do I have to tackle this guy? Because even though he's like, a foot shorter than Darnell Washington, he's still annoying to tackle. So I put Warren and Washington around the same level. Maybe a little bit more Washington because of his ability to go up and get the football. But then after Warren, I'd say Austin. And then I would put maybe Jonnu Smith, maybe Scott. Yeah, we really haven't seen much of Scotty Miller. So yeah, if I was going Metcalf, Freiermuth, Gainwell, I think I said Wilson, Washington, Warren, Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, and Calvin Austin. It's crazy how far Calvin Austin's fallen. Yeah, and just looking at the efficiency stats, even despite Roman Wilson's lack of consistency, pretty much any time frame you narrow the aperture to in terms of the statistics, the efficiency is just better for Roman Wilson versus Calvin Austin. When Roman Wilson's not playing well, it usually means, I shouldn't say it that way. When Roman Wilson's not getting the ball, Calvin Austin is also not getting the ball, and usually in more pronounced ways. Pretty much since Roman Wilson was back healthy and Calvin Austin has been healthy, and they've been on basically the same level in terms of availability. So we'll continue to monitor that situation. Let's get out of here on this, Chris. To what extent do you believe the tight ends of a group have lived up to the preseason expectations? Because at training camp, that's all anyone wanted to talk about was how great these tight ends were. The Steelers don't need a wide receiver too because they've got this trio of tight ends who are just going to dominate teams. And Arthur Smith himself was talking them up and hyping them up and kind of doing the offensive version of what Mike Tomlin did when he called the defense historic. He heaped a lot of expectations on them. Sometimes I think, though, I mentioned earlier in the episode, I think tight ends fall into the Travis Kelce or the Rob Gronkowski trap of people think that that's what good tight end play has to look like. So where do you put the bar in terms of what their performance has been versus what they've gotten out of these guys, or what they were hoping to get out of these guys?
I mean, I think the tight ends, I think both units you can't be happy with. I think Darnell Washington's taken a real step up this year. I mean, here's the other thing about this is we're talking about the snaps. Darnell Washington outsnaps both Freiermuth and Smith. And to me, that might be a sign of where the Steelers front office leans in this upcoming offseason because Darnell Washington's got contract considerations coming up soon. I believe this will be his 4th year next year. So, he was drafted in 23, 24. This is his 3rd year in the NFL. So he's one more year in his rookie deal. If they feel like he's the better tight end moving forward, maybe they sign him and they trade away Freiermuth. I don't know. But it is bizarre to me they're not using Freiermuth because I think he's still really good. He gets open. He catches the ball. He does dangerous with the ball in his hands. I'm not saying they should trade away Freiermuth, but I just don't understand their lack of use of him. And so I think Darnell Washington is ahead of schedule. I think Pat Freiermuth is it gets an incomplete because they just don't use him. And I think Jonnu Smith is a letdown. I think he's a major letdown from what they were hoping he would be. And maybe that changes. Maybe they find some different ways to get him the ball. But I think that he has been more of a detriment than an asset for most of this season.
Well, and I think it's probably more negative than positive because even if you believe in Pat Freiermuth, they have not unlocked it for whatever reason, whoever's fault it is. It's not. He hasn't met the expectations, whether it's his fault or someone else's. And so I think that's why the position group as a whole is still a pretty major disappointment for me. I definitely agree about Darnell Washington. I think he's becoming certainly the player. I remember us talking about him on draft night and what could he become and how excited a lot of the people in the comments were that night about him. Chris, I think we've seen him blossom into that, but I don't think it overcomes. It was supposed to be the 3 of them as a unit making up for the lack of an obvious wide receiver 2. They haven't done it. So that's why I have to give them, probably a lower grade there. Chris, thank you for joining me this week, though. We'll be back. You'll be back on Saturday. talking about the upcoming game against the Ravens. I'll be back for the Sunday post-game show with Paul Zeiss, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. And please consider subscribing to our written coverage at post-gazette.com. We referenced a lot of that in this video, and we usually do most of these Wednesdays between Chris's film analysis and his grades post. So if you want to see that in its entirety, you got to head over to postgazette.com. We'll see you over there, and we'll see you here in this same space next week. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.